Hi, this is Block 8, Pax Americana, Section 4, We Like Ike, with the section starting with John Kenneth Galbraith, and it is still about 62 degrees in here. Galbraith is a famous economist from Harvard. He is a Keynesian, as most people from Harvard are. He wrote a book in the 1950s called The Affluent Society, in which he argued that the wealth of the United States was being put to poor use. And he was saying that the wealth that the United States was creating was simply going towards consumerism and consumer goods and people buying newer cars, bigger cars, faster cars, newer houses, bigger houses, better air conditioners, better this, bigger that. And he said that social goods such as the environment were losing out to consumer goods in the United States. And he argues for a Keynesian response. He says that the government should take this wealth and put it towards social goods, such as the environment and such as helping the poor, funding long-term disability, long-term medical care. But in the 1950s, with kind of the moderate, non-progressive Eisenhower in office, and the American people loving their newfound affluence and the ability to spend their money as they saw fit, such calls in the 1950s fell on deaf ears. John Kenneth Galbraith was an elite American, educated obviously in an elite school. And in the 1950s, this elite section of the country kind of scoffed at American 1950s societies. They looked at suburban America and they saw a conformist, dull, stifling, boring society. A guy by the name of Sloan Wilson wrote a book called The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, which pretty much implied that American middle-class living in the 1950s was bereft of a soul. That people went to work and blindly watched television and bought things with their newfound money and lived otherwise meaningless existences. And he did so only to fit in with what his neighbors expected of him. And we can see that if we look at an intellectual history of the United States, in the 1950s, elite American opinion is turning against the American middle class, and the values that the American middle class holds. And it says that those values are bourgeois and stifling and boring, and they lead to soulless material destruction. So there's a disconnect in the 1950s between the elites in society, people like John Kenneth Galbraith, Harvard educated, and just your average everyday American who wants, nothing more than a nice house out in the suburbs, to work for a living, support his family, and raise his children. There's a disconnect between those two worlds, which continues to this day.